the heart of our community. And they made it real. And every community, whether it's South Auckland or others, Mr Chair, Mr Chair, Mr Chair.
David Clark.
Mr Chair, I'm very happy to rise to speak to this bill, and it's good to follow a speaker who was raising some important points about the Aotearoa model and the way in which that has worked by drawing on local communities, and indeed Mr Robertson referred earlier to the example in Balclutha, which applies a similar principle and has been very successful. We've certainly heard a lot of vacuous nonsense from the other side of the House this evening, and most recently Mr Naro used some examples of young folk with ambition, he said, who he was able to inspire to be successful, all the while failing to note that that was during the period where the youth transition scheme implemented by Labour was in place. And he inferred that this has this proposal will have more funding and bring more funding with it, when that is not true. It doesn't put the necessary supports in place which are necessary for our young people to get ahead. We heard Paula Bennett talking excitedly about using food as a motivator. She may as well have said, let them eat cake. This really does not work as a concept, because what it fails to do is to address the real barriers to work. It fails to address the real barriers to work. The availability of work is not addressed by this bill. The availability of childcare is not addressed by this bill. And the skills and education training required for the young people to find work is not addressed by this bill. This is important context, and these barriers to work must be addressed if we wish to make a difference in this area. Work testing alone will not achieve anything. The long-term welfare dependency concept was created by the Welfare Working Group, and it's perhaps something of a dog whistle. We know that it takes, for example, a university graduate between 6 months and a year to find work. Defining long-term as more than a year is something of a stretch. And what is most shocking perhaps about these reforms is that they are, in their own way, quite unambitious. There will be more people, we're told, on a benefit in 2017 if these are successful than when the government took office. And that is shameful. That is embarrassing. If that is ambition, it's probably realistic, given that this bill does fail to address those fundamental barriers to work: the availability of work, childcare, accessibility and skills training. Mr Chair, those welfare targets too are notably 2 elections away, and there's similarity there with other plans and targets the government has brought to bear, the emissions targets, rebalancing the economy, when in fact we see the economy balance of trade getting worse over the projected period that the government accounts look at. And Mr Chair, we see the record getting worse in terms of so-called welfare dependency. The number of people on the DPB rose by 13.2% between January 2009 and January 2012, but the number of people on the unemployment benefit rose by 82%. So we might ask ourselves, why in that context are we targeting the DPB mums? And perhaps it is indeed simply a distraction away from the real issue of creating jobs, the real issue that the government has not addressed during its 4 years in government. It has the worst economic record we know of any government in the last 50 years. There are 50,000 people a year leaving for Australia, and unemployment has risen by over 50%, nearly 50,000 people since John Key took office. These are the real problems, and these are the things that are not being addressed through this legislation. Parents require, to get proper work, to get decent paying jobs, they require correct training and education, they require the correct care and education opportunities for their children, for childcare, and they require, more than anything, jobs to go to. There is no solution as good as a decent job for people who are seeking one. And nothing in this bill will actually provide those facing these barriers with the tools to overcome them. And indeed, in this context, we see that the government has, Mr Chair.
The Honourable
Mr Chair.
Paula Bennett.
Mr Chairman, I thought it was opportune